This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Life is hard sometimes, and there are many pathways in navigating the inevitable ups and downs of life. In riding these waves, I look to my yoga practice and also therapy. We all go through tough times like big life changes, periods of instability, conflict, or loss. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist entirely online, which is very convenient, flexible, and suited to fit your schedule. Take the questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist. And if it's not the right match for you, no worries. You can change your therapist for no additional charge. Sometimes getting started in therapy is the hardest part. To make it a little bit easier, go to the link provided in the show notes or go to visit betterhelp.com/yoga and podcast today to get 10% off your first month.
Vibing out in the sun, we welcome everyone. Gave 101, the goal is having fun. I'm happy, like I told ya. I'm stretching out, doing yoga, not stopping till it's over. Don't want the day to be done. I'm happy, like I told ya. I'm stretching out, doing yoga, not stopping till it's over. Don't want the day to be done.
Welcome, friends, to Yoga and Podcast. This show highlights the science and brings the magic of yoga and mind-body practices down to earth for the everyday person to help you live your best life. I'm your host, Ashley Weber, a yoga and Pilates teacher and forever student who is oh so curious about all things yoga and. I'm super excited to share with you this upcoming conversation. Now, let's sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode, y'all. Joining us on today's episode, he was named Best Yoga Instructor of 2021 in Austin, Texas. He has an extensive background in human rights activism and community organizing and advocacy. He has been on multiple episodes on this show, Yoga and Queerness, Yoga and Self-Parenting. Those are just to name a few. He is also my really good friend. Please welcome back to the show, Fonzy Hernandez. Hey, Fonzy.
Hello. Nice to be here with you again. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, I'm so glad to have you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you. Thank you so much for letting me be on here again.
Yeah.
Such a pleasure, seriously.
Yeah, and we're doing this a little different. We're at this beautiful downtown
Absolutely.
Central Library.
It's amazing here. It's like the stairs are almost like levitating.
Yeah, and we're in this really cool office space. So I'm glad we get to do this in person because we always did it through Zoom before.
That's very true. Yeah. We did a Zoom and then phone call at one point, no?
Well, we talked on the phone, but we never recorded
you're
the
right.
phone
You're
call.
right. You're right.
Yeah, we talked about the episode through the phone. Yeah, so now we're like, but then in real life, when we have dinner together, we talk about subjects all the time.
That's true.
So it's just like this without food.
True.
Yeah. Where shall we begin with this? This is a lot of stuff to talk about today. I guess just all encompassing, how do we build a community with integrity would be a way to start this.
Yeah. In my background as a community organizer, there were several, at least 5 components that consist of a very self-efficient community that creates equity, right? And then one of them is relationship building, education, capacity building of community members, leadership development, and community action. So those are some of the few things that kind of empower a community to be for a cause, or I think if we think of community as a tree, the roots, a lot of our so history gives us a lot of what our identity is, and we can all relate to that, right? We all have we can relate to this time and space in terms of current events. Like, I mean, we had COVID, we had all these like a lot of political agitation right now, and as people, we can relate to that, and all these qualities that I mentioned create power, right? And then it equals equity. So I feel like with a community, to put it in a different perspective, a community uses its members or knows the members' skills in places where they work best in the community. You know, I may be really good at like talking to people. You may be great at the background or the background of building this cause or whatever.
Like the behind the scenes.
Exactly. And I don't mean that as a good or bad thing. I think unfortunately we live in a society that doesn't see people's skills for what they can offer to a community, and a community with integrity uses that to its advantage, where we use each community member to their best of their abilities in terms of their skills, and that creates equity in the way where like we see all our skills as equal, and there's no comparison. Obviously, I mean, we'll get into it more in detail, but that's my kind of overlay or the whole scope of it.
So an integral community values the people within the community,
Yes.
and they're all equally valuable. They have different skills, but they're equally valuable.
Correct.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, is that what makes a true community?
I think a true community, these are qualities that consist of a true community. Of course, I'm coming back from an aspect or a perspective of a community organizer, which is very methodical. And I do think that a community, it's very fascinating, and I'm going to go into the yoga teachings. Buddhism, what is said in Buddhism is that there is no more prophet, if you will.
No more guru.
And the future is community. So I think that we are in a perfect time in our life where we can see that community. Like, I mean, you obviously see, like, when you go to the farmer's market, that's another form of community organizing, because it supports our infrastructure, our economic, the people here, socially and economically. It really is for the well-being of the people that live in our community. Right? That being said, I think a community at this point is being able to mold into what society needs. So obviously we're dealing with a lot of political agitation right now, and I think our future, at least I've learned this individually as a person, that in our life we have to be mobile or transform,
like adaptable.
Adaptable. That is the perfect word. Yes, thank you so much. We have to be adaptable, and I think an adaptable community is important to be. It is important to be adaptable because we can adapt to each other's needs and the community's needs. And I think that's, for me, at least what I believe in, and what as a community organizer is important, because we have such. We'll take the political things that are happening right now. They're so rigid, you know, and they're obviously, we obviously know that there are laws in our country that are so, like, years ago. I mean, like,
going backwards.
Right, exactly. And so as you can see now, or I hope I can portray that, like, the only thing that could really benefit us is to be adaptable into what people need, rather than the rigidity, you know. And that's a duality. I mean, like, there is just like yoga and the teachings teaches that there's joy, there's also sadness, right? And it's not that one or the other is better or worse. It's like, how do we, where the yoga teachings propose, and in community organizing, how do we find ourselves in space in the middle of it all, right? So that there, when we can find our middle, that's respecting our boundaries, and it's also adapting to what that current situation needs, or whether it's community, yourself, and you can see that in many ways. Obviously, there's like social, economic, there's a economic status, and then there's social. Those are two opposite things too, right? And so how do we find the middle where it's like, obviously we know that there's a lot of companies that have profit, and then there's nonprofit, right? That's another duality. How do we find the middle way so that it could be sustainable rather than like depleted? If I'm making sense? Am I making sense?
Yeah, you're making sense. So I'm getting from you, true community is an aspect of a true community is the ability to respond and adapt when the community has a need.
Exactly.
So it's like, for like example, someone in the community, I know someone in the community who's really well known in Austin, had a health thing going on, and someone did a GoFundMe for her to pay for her health medical bills. And like within a day, she got beyond what they were asking for, because everyone in the community like donated like $5, but there were so many people in her community. It was really beautiful to watch that,
and see that. I feel like that's a product of her building relationships, right?
Yeah.
So in community organizing, a lot of the main things in a community and that help a community come together is the shared histories and identities. What I mentioned about how history gives us an identity and can give us something to each of us relate to, and as well as like organizing traditions. What we have, like obviously that can be like holiday, it could be, I don't know, meeting up for a yoga class, and that encourages a lot of building relationships. And once you build those relationships, you can begin to transform communities, transform individuals, and transform institutions.
Cool.
And so, like, the concept of, it's beautiful because the concept of organizing is really starting from the ground up. Yeah, and I mean that obviously I've had that experience in nonprofits when I've worked, and I've had that in my personal life, because this is not just like for political action, but it's also, from what I've discovered recently in my life, for your dreams, you know. And I mean, like, we could say that if we all followed our heart's desire, the world would be a better place in some ways. And I mean, yeah, that comes with organizing a political, like, a protest or something.
Well, would you mind sharing how your life has changed? Like, for instance, Mexico City, which I'm just so impressed by your journey with all that. And you wanted to do it, and you did it. And
absolutely,
it was your skill set in community organizing, I imagine, helped you a lot, or helped you get.
I feel, and I've mentioned this to you before, that like it's really interesting how everything's clicked in my life. As a community organizer, to the yoga teachings or the philosophy. And I mean, I've done my own homework, right? Like even, and you know, I last year had this whole itch about I want to just work at Mexico City. And then mainly for personal reasons, because I wanted to know my roots and my past, and really understand some form of reconciliation with my family, or like my life in general. And I had no idea. I didn't know anyone in Mexico City. And, you know, I thought, how the heck am I going to do this? And the only thing I knew was my community organizing background. So when you have nothing, right, that's a polarity. you can have something. That's the other polarity, right? So I then began to call random salons. I'm a hairdresser, so salons in Mexico City, and a couple said yes, and it started from there. And now it's to the point where like I go and I know things are becoming familiar, for sure, or people as well. And it's beautiful how much when you're willing to inspire or others with your story and vice versa, and you're willing to help other people with their own aspirations, how much willingness that person is willing to help you too. And that's with like community organizing or following your goals or dreams, really.
So would you mind telling me more about like listing all the skills, maybe not all the skills, but listing more the skills of what you learned as a community organizer, building relationships, that's clear.
Yeah.
What else? Tell me more.
So I wrote down a definition that I like to mention to people whenever they don't know, because community organizing is so broad, right? And nobody really thinks that community organizing has a methodical approach to things. And it's really a benefit for us to learn how to do this, because it really creates, as we get older, I mean, when we're kids, especially in America, we're taught to be individuals. But now as I'm turning 33, I think at this point of my life, it's more about like, I don't want to say assimilation, but surrendering to a group of people. And I think we all yearn to kind of feel like we belong. Right?
Of course. Right.
I'll tell you the definition I wrote for community organizing, and it says community organizing is a process by which people are brought together to act in common self-interest, bringing together talents, resources, and skills of people in the community in order to increase their collective power and work for social change. While organizing describes any activity involving people interacting with one another, a formal manner which community organizing is in the pursuit of a common agenda. So that's whether your dream, I've translated it as to the individual, because you may be listening to this, well, how does this help me? Community organizing is everywhere in your life, from your job to your friends to the yoga class that you're attending. And it isn't necessarily to gain something from someone, but it's also you find the duality of, loving kindness, compassion, equanimity, appreciative joy. All those are dualities. And when you can really want the best for someone, and I'm like, hey, I want to be a contribution to your possibility, without expecting something back. There is this building, this relationship that is built, an experience that you had with someone that is our future. Because the reality, there's a lot of studies in, I'll go back with studies, because there's a lot of studies that in like third world countries, it's not about monetary gain. It's countries that run off of trust. Right.
I love it.
So there's a lot. Yeah, I'm not saying that third world countries are best, or I'm not saying that our country, but there's good and bad. And right, I'm just pointing out there's obviously a lack of resources in some places, and we have to see what works. Why does it work when there's no there's certain resources that aren't there, but why are they flourishing in this aspect? Right? And I think that's where our future is how do we build trust? Because we've all been somewhere where it's like, and it's community organizing is about letting the outside influence you rather than vice versa, because we live in a world where it's like, let's be influencers, and like when I say influence, I mean like we're inspiring each other. We're like, that's the influence. In culture, if you want to be involved with a culture, like rather than just let the people teach you.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Well, what I like about you're talking about the duality of community is what I'm getting from it is the community itself can be a resource, can be nourishing for the people in it. But then the duality of that is it's a resource, it's nourishing, they benefit from that. But it also, they have to give to their community. They have to participate in their community.
Exactly.
You can't just phone it in.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I mean, and that's part of the experience. And you may say that we can bring this to a relationship too. If you're dating someone, it's really a dance, you know. And I know in some communities that I've really read about it, when they see like, especially when I read about indigenous communities, when they, for example, like someone who's homeless, they don't see it as like, oh, that person's homeless. They see it as like, oh, a part of our community is going through this, and it's out of our benefit as a whole to help this person.
Yeah.
Rather than like, oh, they can deal with them. They can deal with it on their own.
Yeah, they're not hyper individualistic
exactly.
Like us Americans can be. iPhone, iPad.
Well, yeah, and it's like, I mean, it's a very, and like the thing is, like, we're in our world, you know, there are a lot of other studies. I recently read this book where it talked about how like children are becoming less emotionally intelligent because, I mean, we can blame it on technology, but I don't want to blame it on technology. I want to blame it on the way that we perceive technology, because we live in a world where we think that this computer should respond to us a certain way, when in reality the computer doesn't have any emotion, right? So that in that way it's desensitized ourselves from what emotional. I mean, I've gotten mad at my iPhone or you know, like it's so easy to, and like especially if you see a child playing and they get mad because they don't win, like that's something to be wary about. And community organizing really teaches you how to expand into emotionally, relationship wise.
Ooh, tell me more.
Like I mean, like even, for example, we'll take my case where I go to Mexico. I had to force myself to reach out to unknown people. And the only thing I had was trust. I could have shown up and they would have been like, no. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, so it really teaches you to really use your skills as a person, and create something out of like nothing, creating possibilities. It's really, they're always there. The possibilities are always there. I think it's just, how do we organize ourselves, right? We can start with the concept of the tree. What are my traditions? Like, how do I find people with equal traditions? For me, it was like, oh, I do hair. What can I offer someone in a different world or in a different country? My skill, and how can I have it benefit them, and vice versa, you know? And obviously when I work in Mexico, I'm really careful about that because I don't get paid any more than my peers who I work with. And that's another aspect of community organizing, is being in the shoes of other people.
Building respect through action.
Exactly.
Within the community.
Yeah, because I mean, I know I think our responsibility as humans, as well as knowing our privileges, right? I'm not gonna point your privileges out. I think it serves us, it benefits us to really search what our privileges are. And you may say that, like, oh, Fonzy, you're Mexican. Like, how can you be privileged in another country, in your own country? And I it's a very sticky situation because I know that I come from the U.S. and economically I went to Mexico wanting to respect the community, so therefore I am being paid like a citizen there. I'm not getting paid anymore, and I wanted to do that to be able to relate to and I talked to the owner about that and being like, listen, I want to earn their respect and I want to earn like the same livelihood as they are. I know it wouldn't be exactly the same, but I know that when it comes to, I mean, it's happening in many different countries, but when it comes to gentrification, and this is another thing about community organizing, is having your awareness, right? Your scope of awareness and knowing where you are in space, because that's privilege, right? Privilege is taking up space, right?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And like when you can acknowledge and know where you are in space, then you can move around the world without causing harm.
So it's also self-trust.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Trusting
That's a beautiful
others.
way to say it. But I think it's such a beautiful concept, and yeah, I know that I will never fully experience what people, I mean, it's like I said, gentrification is happening everywhere, and I always ask myself, how as a community or a part of the community can I contribute, both socially and economically, and it may seem like you're taking, I mean, I'm not losing anything, but I am gaining experience. And I could care less about them. I mean, the money is great, but like experiences are so much more valuable than, I mean, wealth is experience.
Yes.
And I've told you before that, like, success, I believe success is you're willing to lose it all, knowing that the skill that you have will get you to the same place.
Oh, wisdom bomb. I love your wisdom bomb.
I mean, and that's what community organizing has offered. I mean, like, in some ways my life seems like an experiment now, because it almost seems like I'm hanging off a thread. But would I ever want to change that? No. Because it has been a hell of a ride, which is good. But and I think anyone can benefit from community, like being an activist I mean, whether it's you're fighting for your own cause in life, and that's your dream. I don't think it would hurt for you to follow that, because if you're happy, the world would be happy, right?
Yeah. And you're affecting other people with your happiness.
Absolutely.
Well, what might the yoga community get wrong about community?
Yeah. Well, and I'll be really careful about because I mean I can. I
know. Same.
It's like, I think the really sad part, and I rarely see it, but we've kind of coined so much. Everything's been overused, very phrasey. It's been so because of that, I think the action part of yoga has been disconnected, because we've so focused on the let's be vulnerable, give it all away, and it's not about that. I think even me spiritually, as a yoga teacher, I've had to disarm and dismantle an image that I thought I was supposed to be. And I think that is our job, and I think another question someone might ask is like, well, how do I not give myself away too?
I was about to ask you that.
And I think this ties in really well with what I just said. And I think the question is, are you protecting an image that you think you should be?
Like an ego thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to say ego, but,
okay.
but I mean, in the line of ego, are you protecting something that you think you should be? Right?
Yeah.
Rather than like how I'm supposed to look to the world, right?
Oh,
how are you protecting that? Yeah. And if it is, then there's a lot of questions you might have to ask yourself.
Yeah.
You know, that's something for you to decipher, not you specifically, but the person. You know, and it's like, and I'll give a more tangible example, like money. You know, I think I've talked to you that money is a resource, and I think in America or in the world, to be honest, we think of it as part of us. Like I always like to think of it as like the child, like me, mine, and that's what we think of money. You know, like but reality, what if we thought of money as a way of creating experiences?
So money's just broader. It's not this identity of, well, I earn this much, therefore I am worthy.
Correct. Yes. And I'm not saying, I think the world, I think poverty is very real, you know.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying that like, oh, you know, like give all your money away. There is a balance, right? You still want to eat, you still want to like live comfortably. But I think the idea of money can get us in trouble a lot, you know? Or even like, I've told you before, like I've had people approach me of certain things, and the way that they have their own language in their head, like, how did you get to do that? And I'm like, wow, like I wonder how many things you're stopping yourself from doing in your life.
And they're referring to Mexico City.
Yeah, anything, in anything. Yeah, and it doesn't matter. It's just like, it's like, and I know their intentions behind it, but it's like we set ourselves up for failure sometimes.
So they're mirroring to you as they're like, how did you do this thing? You could tell that they're already self-limiting because they couldn't fathom doing it for themselves. So it might sound like they're judging you, but really they're judging themselves.
Well, and when reality, it's like, I don't think what I've done is profound. I mean, when I tell people that I've never even stepped foot in Mexico City. And when I tell people that, they think it's crazy. But I'm like, you've stepped alone into a restaurant. If you can do that, you can do that anywhere. Yeah. Right? To me, I think it's because I've had this experience as a community organizer that is so normalized to me.
Well, and you've had to be independent. I think maybe the people telling you this, they may not have had to be independent in certain ways.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It's like, I think that's another part of like defending who you think you should be. Oh. Right? Yeah. It's another level. I mean, I still have that. I'm not gonna. There's parts of me where I'm like, dang. Like, dang.
Can we talk about what do you mean by like getting too emotional in a cause within a community? We talked about this prior, so I'm referring back to our conversation, a few days ago.
There is a thing in community organizing that it says, "Don't panic, organize." Right? Okay. So and I think that that is fear is such an interesting thing, right? Because the definition of fear is what, like something appearing real, right? And I think the yoga, I know the yoga teachings are responsible, or at least teach us to regulate. And I think it's important, whether it's following your goals in life, your dreams, organizing for political reasons, to you can be passionate about something, but you have to organize. I don't want to say compartmentalize, but when you're acting out of fear or emotions, you're defeating the cause. That's what my mentor would always say. So like, if you putting that forward, your emotions, your panic, your fears, you're letting the enemy in.
Well, and I imagine...
and I don't want to say enemy.
Enemy. Well, I imagine you're attracting the wrong energy. Being a woo-woo yoga teacher, talking about energy now. Like,
right.
Or you can't make clear decisions if you're reactive and stressed, and you can't let opportunity in.
Right. Yeah. And I understand, like, mental health is such a big... I mean, that's the problem with yoga, too. It's like, yoga's not therapy.
Yes,
I'm sorry to say that.
Thank you.
And, I know that some people can't have the access or don't have the access of a professional, but there are some resources out there that can help. Yeah. I think mental health is slowly becoming more accessible to people.
Slowly.
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, and I do see it even on the online. Yeah. And I hope people, is what I'm trying to say, I hope people are trying to reach for that, because I personally don't believe people should profit off of trauma. And I think that it's not my business. It isn't my business to fix your problems. We all individually have to deal with this on our own. Of course, other people can help us in terms of support. Yeah. But
no. Well, and I think when I think of that, I think of what you said earlier about not giving yourself away. Yeah. But also like the idea of scope creep, where people, like, you're a yoga teacher and you're teaching yoga, and people come up to you and then they want to do the therapy thing, but you're not a therapist, right. So therefore that's when scope creep comes in, and it's just like there shouldn't be a conversation about like let the therapist take that on. I'm not saying that's what you do, but I think it's too easy when you're a yoga teacher. People want you to be their physical therapist, their therapist, their like friend. They want you to be all these things, and the boundary of
I mean, it does fall into duality, because my right doing is not going to be your right doing. Like what's healed me is not going to heal you.
Wow.
And I think that when you can completely have a deep understanding, or people can have a deep understanding of what that is, then I think we can approach. The thing is, I mean, I don't want to get into too depth with it, but the thing is, like, it becomes traumatized people traumatizing other people.
Oh my God. Well, and I had an experience somewhat recently. I have someone in my community who I really trust, really love as a person, trust their judgment 100%. Yeah. And the advice I got, I just, in my gut, I knew it was wrong advice. Yeah. I had a problem. I went to this trusted friend. It was not the advice I wanted, and I had to walk away and just go, okay, I had to honor that. And I don't know where I'm going with that, other than where was I going? We can cut this out. I was going to tie it back to something. Well, the duality, I guess. Yeah. Like it can be a wonderful person within a community who helps you, but at the end of the day, they're still human, and sometimes advice given is not what you need, and you said traumatized people can traumatize people. Like, absolutely. That was an example of that. And even though they meant well, and she cares about me, that doesn't mean I should take all the advice.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, I've told you, like, if you can see yourself as a community, I mean, like, literally your cells work like the perfect community.
That's true.
Like, what other example do we need, right? And when you can start to see that, like, even, your joy or your happiness is, it's an extension of you, but it doesn't define who you are. right?
Yeah.
Because the purpose isn't to have ecstatic joy or to have ecstatic sadness. It's for like peace.
Peace.
Mhm.
Ooh.
That's why abundance and integrity aren't one and one.
Yeah.
They're like complete polar opposites.
Ooh, let's
right?
talk about that.
Yeah. And like that's the so a lot of the times when we think about abundance, we think of that we think we're happy.
Mm-hmm.
That we're going to be happy when we have abundance.
Oh.
But that doesn't necessarily mean we have integrity. You know, and that's a lot of what community organizing talks about, because there's social and then there's economy.
Mm-hmm.
Two opposite things.
Oh.
Right? And then there's abundance and then there is integrity.
Oh.
So how do we find the middle of all
that.
those four things?
Wow.
Right? And if you think of that with your life, I mean, like, say you want to start a project, you know that you have nothing. That's a polarity.
Yeah.
Now, what do I do? Say you want to become a writer.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
You're a terrible writer. You're going to be terrible at it.
How did you know?
Right?
I'm kidding.
You're going to be terrible. I know. I love writing, but I know I like sometimes have terrible times. But then there's the good. There's your proficiency. But then in the middle of all of that, there's what type of writing. There's the rigid, and then there's the creative, right? So like, how do you find yourself in the middle? And that's how you create your own identity or your own. That's how you begin to. That's how I start to see myself in terms of where I take up space in my life.
I love that.
You know, where do you find yourself? I mean, because sometimes people are like groundedness. You know, what is groundedness when it sometimes feels like you're catching yourself in thin air, right?
Oh,
And it's you're always like falling, so we have to create a concept of like, okay, where am I in space in terms of this goal? Because no one really teaches you how to ground yourself in yoga, really.
Yeah. Well, and then isn't balance just this constant recalibration? Right. It's not fixed. It's like
correct.
A constant.
Well, and then balance isn't individual. I think balance is as a whole. Now, if you think, because your balance can be selfish in some ways, right? Like, you know, like I told you the story about me being vegetarian.
Yes.
And
let's talk about that. I love this story.
And okay, so I was vegetarian for maybe a couple years, and I went to Mexico as a kid. I was a teenager, and my aunt loved to cook. Right, and this falls into community too, right? Like, and I don't think she knew what vegetarian was, and so she made me like tacos, and I remember at that time thinking like, if I don't eat this taco, if I have to eat this taco because this is her way of letting me in.
Yeah, well, and it was a taco filled with meat.
Exactly. Yes. And therefore I did eat it because I was defending an image that wasn't me, right? Nothing was going to happen if I ate that taco, right? But what did happen was building relationship, right? Yeah. And I mean, that's a simple thing. That's such a simple thing, but like, how many doors are we invited on at that we don't take the offer? Oh wow! You know, like how many opportunities in life do we have? Because we're all community organizers. For people letting us be a part of their life, be a contribution.
Well, and I can't help but think of all the times I'm very introverted, and when I'm out in public, I'm like, I don't want anyone to talk to me, and I give off that vibe that I don't want anyone to talk to me, and that's shifted over the years. But like you're saying all this, and I wonder how many opportunities or connections I've lost just by behaving the way I behave. Like it's more people are friendlier than I around strangers. I'm not a friendly stranger person.
But the thing is, like, we can find ways in our own manner.
In our own way.
Yeah.
In our
I don't think it's like...
not just one way.
I don't think it's like a way... I think it's also important to have a lot of rest in your life.
Ooh,
I think that's the number one goal. Like, there is a thing people ask me, like, what are the qualities to be part of a member in a... I mean, like, what should people have in a community?
Yes.
And it's like... what we would say would be big eyes for observing, big ears for listening, big helping hands, and big feet for walking.
Well, I have the big feet.
But and it's that all, it explains curiosity, you know.
Ooh, okay. Let's talk more about yoga and duality. How does yoga help us with duality?
So, like the teachings, they are responsible to teach us about the polarities of life, right? So I like to make the example of a compass.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And like I've said before, anything can be a compass.
Okay.
And that can be a moral compass in which we find ourselves in the map. And I think that's what yoga simply put, so that we can identify where we are in space, so that we can be in alignment with a community.
And it's that moment to reflect and question,
right?
Like, how can I help my community?
Yeah. How can I be a contribution?
Yeah. Wow.
It's, I hope that you can see that the yoga, right? The yoga teaching.
It's totally yoga.
The teachings, I think spirituality is living your life. To be spiritual is living your life in your own way. You don't have to wear anything. You don't have to, you know what I mean? It's really just following your heart's desire.
And that's simple.
That is so simple.
That's such a simple way to do it. What advice do you give for those of us who really have no guidance thus far, trying to organize? What do you have to say to that?
So, I always suggest people create kind of like a social experiment in some ways, because I've kind of done that when I've started going to Mexico. I call this thing, it's called Circle of Familiarity. It's from what I learned from I used to work with a sociology professor who taught me all these really cool things. And I want to preface about what there's 3 levels of interaction in community organizing, and I wrote these down. One of them is primary community, when people touch elbows, quote unquote, and meet daily. That is one type of community. And then the only reason I'm telling you these degrees is to understand the power. Like, obviously, when you meet people daily, you have more power to influence, or vice versa, right? The secondary community is when people have the opportunity to meet weekly at a market or at a yoga class, right? The tertiary community, when people meet monthly or more often, but at least an annual or like a party or something like that, a year. And so this circle of familiarity is picking, it can be a community that you frequent. It could be, I chose restaurants in Mexico City, and I would frequent them. And the idea is that you frequent them so much that they begin to recognize and familiarize yourself with the people that work there, the people that go there in the mornings, and they influence you rather than vice versa. And the idea is that eventually it creates a gray area that becomes bigger than what you actually think so. And you begin to attract people in your life that like the same things.
Can we talk about your encounter at the restaurant?
Yes.
Okay.
So in my process of doing this in Mexico City, I was eating breakfast at one of my favorite restaurants, and I know the waiters, the waitresses, they're my friends. I love them to death, and also they have really good food. And I look over, and my friend from Chicago, who I haven't seen in 5 years, is there. I had no idea she was in Mexico City, nor did I know she knew about Mexico City. And I was so confused. And, I may call it a coincidence, but maybe it's something I created with this, like, community, organizing, liking the similar things that she likes. She liked the tiramisu there. I like their breakfast. So, like, it's hard to say that, oh, what a coincidence, when we knew we like similar things, and we because we're similar people, we naturally gravitate towards the same circle.
That's so cool.
So this concept of community organizing becomes bigger than what we think it really is.
I mean, that is big. Yeah.
I mean, that trip was weird too, because I also bumped into a person that gets their tattoo by the same artist that I do on the plane. So it's like you begin to, like, I don't want to say it's magic, but
it's not magic.
At this time of my life, I try to conceptualize the magic of life, right? So that it can actually be tangible for the world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're mindfully, consciously wanting to cultivate a community.
Well, because it's easy to be like, oh, the universe put me. And I mean, I'm not even going to... Notice I didn't even say manifest. Because I don't believe in that word.
Yeah.
I mean...
Ooh, I like that.
It's like we have so much power that we aren't capable of that I don't think we realize. I don't know.
Just how powerful. Well, I like that. I think that's a healthy... It sounds like you have 2 feet on the ground and your head firmly on your shoulders about, like, it's not like this, oh, well, the universe provided, like, yes and
that's
no.
So, like, dismissive.
It's
in
dismissive.
Some way. And I'm really careful about that, because, I mean, I had a background with, like, I've had experiences with the yoga world where it's just, there's too much fluff, and there was never an explanation of things.
Yeah.
And we have to be, in life, and I say this not as, like, we just have to be fierce in what we want and what we, like, we have to be specific.
Yeah.
And I think that's the next level, is being clear, and having clear intentions in life.
Well, what I like about what you're saying about you didn't use the word manifest, the universe provide, like, you're kind of like, it takes your own power away on something. Like, blaming it on the universe, it's like, no, you got yourself there.
Part of it is, like, okay, as a queer person of color, I know that this society and in this world is very against me in certain ways, right? But I also understand that I have complete responsibility to a degree.
Yeah.
To a degree.
Yeah.
I love that you said that, because when we say phrases like the universe provided, we're kind of taking our own power away.
Yeah.
And I'm someone who, no, I believe we all have equal power. That's equity.
Yes, that truly is. Yeah.
It's like knowing that as people, and then the more we can influence and inspire each other, the more power we have in this world.
Yeah.
And that's the only way we'll get out of what we need to get out of in this world, is being able to empower each other and realizing that we have they're not the same skills, but they're equally of value, and that's powerful.
Yeah. I want to ask you about benefits of being in an integral community versus not having a community.
This is such a very complex question, because I've been part of groups that eventually, I mean, I think you end up knowing you'll have to go through that yourself and know that, like, are these people, when I leave this group of people and go home, am I feeling empowered? And I'm careful to say empowered because sometimes your own community will approach you because you need to see some different perspective, right? That's a different story. And that is up to you to, you will know, I think. I do believe that's a very difficult question, I will say.
Yeah, so you're saying, like, it depends because sometimes your community will hold up a mirror to you, and
yes,
in some cases, yeah, it'll be empowering. In other cases, maybe there'll be moments where you need to see what's in the mirror. Right?
Yeah.
I think of the example of, like, someone who maybe is abundant but doesn't have a community, perhaps. Like, when they go to the airport, they take a taxi to and from the airport by themselves. They don't have a community to reach out and ask for, hey, can you give me a ride? And then I think about those who are in a community who may not have a lot of abundance. They have people helping them along the way, picking them up to and from the airport, or whatever. But I think loneliness and maybe depression, if you don't have a community, is what I would think.
I agree. And now that I think about it, if you feel powerless, and I mean that by, like, even if you're confronted with an issue that the community has or wants to see, or like wants you to see something that you're not seeing, like a blind spot. They would do it if they were truly for your best,
like integral.
They would do it in a way where you're feeling empowered.
Yes,
that is important.
So it's like richness of life is to have a community in your life.
Oh, I agree.
An integral community.
I mean, like, I don't think we can be anywhere in our life without people.
Yeah, I agree.
That's the reality. Like, and I've said this before in other podcasts. It's like the relationships you hold with people, the tone that you set with these relationships will set you up for success in the future. Because, it's such an important thing to have relationships that are filled with integrity. You know?
Well, I'm grateful that you're in my community and I'm in your
Thank
community,
you.
Fonzy. How can we stay connected with you?
Well, I have a Instagram, FonzyBoy1, FonzyBoy1. You can reach me through email as well, and it's alfonsus19@gmail.com, ALFONSUS19@gmail.com.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. I'll have all that info in the show notes, so you're just one click away from connecting with Fonzy. Fonzy, thank you so much.
It was such a pleasure, seriously, and I hope that you can take this. I hope that this inspires people to use this knowledge and to. There's a lot of great resources about community organizing online that will set you up for success.
I love it.
It's a wild ride too, so let me know.
Thank you, Fonzy.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you receive value from the show, please write us a 5-star review, and or you can text this episode to just one friend who you know will love yoga and podcast. We thank you so much in advance for the huge favor. Word of mouth helps support the show in reaching a greater audience, and we could not grow without you. If you want to connect with us, our email is yogaandpodcast@gmail.com. The and is spelled out YOGAAND podcast@gmail. Please follow us on Instagram at Yoga and Podcast. We are now on TikTok. The handle is also Yoga and Podcast. When you follow us, we will follow you right back on both platforms. Music is by Mama Duke. Graphics, guest booking, and media by me, your host, Ashley Weber. I am so grateful for you. Thank you for listening.